everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Australian book tag. So this is a tag that is inspired by lots of different iconic Australian things, and the idea is that you talk about a book that for you matches to that iconic Australian thing and how it is generally perceived and in what way it is considered iconic. It was originally created by the channel Happy Comes First, who I will link in the description below. I recently saw it on my friend Paige's channel, which is Pages with Paige, and I will link her channel in the description below as well, so you can go and subscribe to both of those fantastic content creators. Paige did this tag recently because in the month of November we are doing the Australian Readathon, which is all about reading books written by Australian authors, and I am one of the co-hosts. When I saw that she had done this tag, I thought, that is perfect, I will also do this tag. The Readathon has been going throughout the entire month of November. I didn't know this tag existed until I saw it on Paige's channel, and she only did it probably a few days ago. So that's why it's going up a little bit later in November. But if you want to get information for the Australian Readathon, potentially to join us next time that we run it, then my announcement video will be linked down as well, so you can go and look at that and get a general idea of what we're doing with the Readathon. But in honor of the Australian Readathon, I thought that I would follow Paige's example and do the Australian book tag for you now. I don't think the original creator intended that you would have to choose Australian books to meet all of the prompts. So all the questions and all my answers are over here on the computer, so I'll be looking off in this direction to get that information. But yeah, let's dive in, shall we? So the first prompt is Koala, and it says, a character you want to cuddle all day long, because koalas are universally known as super adorable cuddly creatures. For this, I have chosen Perry Angel from Perry Angel's Suitcase by Glenda Millard, I'm pretty sure is the author's name. This was a middle grade book that I read a few months ago and absolutely loved. It is set in Australia and it is about a young boy, Perry Angel, who comes to live with a family who have many children who live in this ramshackle rundown house but have so much love for the children and for each other, and they take in Perry Angel, who needs a foster home, and it's about him developing connections in this family and about why the family want to do this for him and how that all plays out, what has happened to Perry Angel and all the trauma that he has lived with, and his suitcase being a representation of all of that trauma. It was such a beautiful story. It was so incredibly well written. It was so well written for younger audiences, and I really think that it is a book that all young people should read. It was just absolutely stunning. It made me cry. It made me so emotional. It really made me feel for this child, and I just want to hug him all day long because he needs so much love. Hugs and happiness, and yeah. So Perry Angel from Perry Angel's Suitcase is my first answer for Koala. The next prompt is Vegemite, and it says a book you love that everyone else hates, because Vegemite is one of those things that's iconically Australian that nobody outside of Australia, and in fact a lot of people in Australia, don't really like it. Which is fair. I personally like Vegemite. I love Vegemite on toast, but I can definitely see why you might not enjoy it. So the question actually is a book you love that everyone else hates. And I struggled a little bit with this one. I couldn't find a book that had a really low rating that I've given a really high rating from Australia. It tended to be that if I didn't like it, then probably not many people did either, according to Goodreads and the average rating on there. So the book that I ended up picking still actually had a 3.76, which is not a bad rating at all. It's pretty much middle of the road. And it only had 3,446 ratings, so whatever that's worth. But the book is Terra Nullius by Claire G. Coleman. I read this book in the middle of last year, I think, and it blew me away. I loved it. I was not expecting it to go where it went, and I just felt like that was done incredibly well. I loved Claire G. Coleman's writing style. I loved all of the comparisons to colonialism and all of the conversations around colonialism and imperialism, and I just thought it was absolutely amazing. Clearly, it hasn't been received in general in that way, but it's clearly been received reasonably well, so I'm not really sure whether or not that's entirely in the spirit of the answer, but to find an Australian book that met those criteria was a little bit tricky, so that's the one I'm going with. Yeah. Next up is the Socceroos, and it says your favourite fictional squad. I think this tag was created about 2 or 3 years ago. So the Socceroos are an Australian soccer team. They are the Australian soccer team, and I feel like they were quite a big deal a few years ago, but this year I think the Matildas were the big thing that everyone was talking about and people were rooting for. So let's change Socceroos to Matildas just for the sake of people knowing what I'm talking about. But essentially it's a team, it's a sporting team. So the idea is to think of your favourite fictional squad. So for this one, I actually am choosing, I don't know if it's technically a squad, it's more of a family, but I'm going to choose the Rykos, which are a family in Exiles by Jane Harper, which is the 3rd book in the series that was begun with The Dry. It's the Aaron Falk series, but the first book is called The Dry. Fantastic mystery crime series. Absolutely love them, thought they were amazing. The Rykos, initially we're just talking about a husband and wife who are friends with Falk, befriend him in the first book, but in the last book it's about them and their extended family and friendship group within this small town where they grew up, and I just thought they were so caring and lovely and got along so well and so accepting of each other, and so just really what you would hope a family would be like, an extended family that included friends and work colleagues and different things like that. So that is my favourite fictional squad from Australian book. The next prompt is Southern Cross, and the actual prompt says your most recent 5-star read. For me, that is The Boy from the Mish by Gary Lonesborough. This is a young adult contemporary by an Australian Aboriginal author and about an Australian Aboriginal boy, teenager, who lives on a mission in country New South Wales, I think. It is about him discovering his sexuality, discovering that he's gay, and forming a relationship with a boy for the first time. I thought it was so well written, so easy to read. It discusses some really important topics, both around being black in Australia and also being gay in Australia in a Indigenous community. I just thought it was done with so much heart and so much thought, and at the same time being really engaging, easy to read, and just really well written and great characters. So definitely gave that one 5 stars. Thoroughly enjoyed it and highly recommend. Then we have the question Patriotism, which I'm not going to even go down that rabbit warren of talking about that. But anyway, the prompt is Patriotism, and the explanation of the prompt is a favourite book by an author from your country. So obviously the aim is that you will use these prompts to do with Australia and things that we're known for and iconic things that are from Australia to talk about books, and you'll pick a book from where you are from. I am Australian. I am doing all of these prompts with books from Australia. So a lot of these are going to be some favourites of mine, but the book that I've picked for this one is The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. This is a historical fiction novel about the creation of the first Oxford English Dictionary. I loved this. I read it a couple of years ago and thought it was absolutely fantastic. Really, really enjoyed the writing style. Thought it was incredibly intelligent, well written, great characters. A lot of really interesting and important feminist conversations, a really, really interesting look at words and how a dictionary got created and the politics that go into the creation of something like the dictionary. Thought it was absolutely amazing. Actually didn't know that Pip Williams is Australian until I was talking about the Australian Readathon on a sprint, and somebody did mention Pip Williams as being Australian, and I have her next book, The Bookbinder of Jericho, on my TBR. I'm super excited to read it, so I was considering whether or not to read that for the Australian Readathon, which is why I am happy to say that one of my favourite books by an Australian author is The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. The sixth prompt is an echidna, and it says, a book you like to look at but it physically hurts to read. So I think you could take this in a number of different ways. A book that you think is really pretty but it's huge, so it's really hard to read physically, or a book that you think seems like it would be really interesting but maybe didn't quite meet your expectations. That's the one that I'm going with, and the book that I've chosen is Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. So Markus Zusak wrote The Book Thief, and I love that book. It is historical fiction in the Second World War, told from Death's perspective, so Death is the narrator, and it is about a young girl and her experiences during the Second World War. Thought it was fantastic, absolutely beautifully written, so amazing. So I was super excited to read Bridge of Clay because I was expecting some really, really great things, but it just didn't work for me. I only read like the first 20 pages maybe. I just couldn't get with the writing style. I found it really strange, to be honest, and I just couldn't quite understand what was happening and who was talking. I know I didn't give it a lot of a chance really, but I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't understand what was happening. It really grated on me, so I decided to DNF that one. I mean, the book itself, I guess, wasn't that amazing to look at. It's not a beautiful cover or anything. It's not a bad cover. It's just not a stunning cover. But I was so hyped up because of The Book Thief and what I was expecting from the writing. And yeah, it didn't physically hurt like in a pain way, but you know, I was just expecting so much and then I was hurt and let down. The seventh prompt is Ned Kelly, and the actual prompt is a book that is really grim but an iconic must read. So I'm actually going for a book that is not really considered iconic or a must read, but I'm going to say Home by Larissa Behrendt. This is a book about the stolen generation, basically. It is about a woman who is taken from her family. I think she was in her mid-teens maybe, was taken from her family and was sent to be a servant for a white family as a way to assimilate her into white culture and to wipe out Indigenous culture. So essentially, during the stolen generation, there were a few different things that happened. Young people were taken from their family, usually children were taken from their families if they had lighter skin, and put into white families as their children to be brought up as white. But what I didn't know and found out from reading this book is that European white Australians also took young people, I think usually probably teenagers or maybe even children, who had darker skin and couldn't necessarily pass as white, but would be taken and used as servants within white families as a way still of breaking that cultural connection and that family connection, which is just so awful and has caused such trauma within so many families for so many people. It's just, I don't even know how to talk about it. It's not my story, so what I suggest, instead of listening to me be uncertain of how to talk about it, is that you read Home and other books like it. It doesn't hold back any punches, but it's just really, really well written, and I found really interesting and totally heartrending and upsetting, but really important to know about my history and about what really happened in Australia to a lot of people. I don't necessarily think that it is as iconic and well known as it should be, but I will say that it is definitely something that should be read, and books like it should be read by everybody, and I think it is really, really grim. So I think it fits the prompt. Moving into the next prompt, which is not quite so upsetting, and that is Great Barrier Reef, and the actual prompt is a book that had you gaping in awe. I think that I probably am not quite answering this question entirely correctly, because I wouldn't say that the book I'm about to say had been gaping in awe. That was actually more Terra Nullius, if I'm completely honest. So Terra Nullius, but for the purposes of talking about other Australian books and not repeating myself, I have actually chosen The Dry by Jane Harper, which I did talk about earlier, although I didn't specifically choose The Dry. I just thought it was really well done. I just really enjoyed it. I just find her writing really interesting, and I thought it was really interesting the way that she had two different storylines happening, and also some of the conversations around dry periods in Australia and drought and how that affects local small town communities and rural communities. So I wouldn't say it had me gaping in awe, but I definitely think that it was fantastic and really worth a read. Next up we have Pavlova, and for this one I need to talk about a light and fluffy book that you can't help but love. So I'm actually going to choose a children's picture book for this one, and that is Possum Magic by Mem Fox. Mem Fox is one of my favourite children's authors ever, and Possum Magic is just such an absolutely fantastic book. It is a beautiful little, like I said, picture book all about possums and possum magic. It's about Grandma Poss and Hush, and Grandma Poss makes Hush invisible to hide her from snakes and different things like that, but Hush does not want to be invisible and asks to be changed back, and Grandma Poss has forgotten how. She figures out eventually that it is to do with human food, and they go on an adventure all around Australia trying to find what human food will turn Hush visible again. It's just adorable. The illustrations by Julie Vivas are just delightful, absolutely stunning, and I highly recommend. I love this book. It's so beautiful. So that's my answer. And the 10th prompt and the final prompt is Milo. A genre/author you reach for to get you out of a reading slump. So my answer is fantasy, specifically the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. Another author I didn't realise was Australian. I actually thought she was from New Zealand, but apparently she's from Australia. The Nevermore series is a middle grade fantasy series which is absolutely so beautiful and cozy and fun. It is all about Morrigan Crow, who thinks that she is going to die, is fated to die on her 11th birthday, but is instead whisked off to another world by an amazing person called Jupiter North, and it's all about her adventures and magic and discovering magic, and it's just fantastic and really fun and beautifully written, and I highly recommend. So yeah, those are the 10 questions for the Australian book tag and all of my answers. So I am going to tag a few people. I would tag my fellow Australians, but instead, to get you thinking about books potentially by Australian authors, but just in general, I am actually going to tag some non-Australians. So I am going to tag Victoria from What Victoria Read, Chloe from Chloe Reads Books, Kat from Brews and Reviews, Cara from Wild Book Garden, and Amy from Amy Myers. All of you amazing people are now tagged, and I really hope that you do the video if you're interested and you enjoy it. Maybe try and think of some books by Australian authors that might fit some of these prompts if you can. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider commenting and let me know what are some of your answers to these questions, whether or not they're Australian authors or not. I'd love to know some of your answers. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me some kind of Australian emoji, whether it be an Australian flag or a koala or a kangaroo, whatever you'd like, but leave me something Australian. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.